and then we'll say up arrow till we get there, and then port 3, and then up arrow, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 20, and then port 4, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 30, and then port 5, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN, and this is going to be, and I've made one mistake here, and you can see that I've made this mistake, and this is kind of a let's see here. Well, the management VLAN is supposed to be VLAN 77, and the native VLAN is supposed to be VLAN 55, right? And you can see that I actually set the trunk native to VLAN 77. So we'll have to change that, right? So that's no good. Management VLAN 77, okay, that's good. All right, so that's a small problem. We can fix that. All right, so switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 77. All right, so what we'll do is we'll go back to port 2, and no, we'll go back to port 1, and we'll change the native VLAN to 55. So what I'll do is I'll say switch port access port 1, there it is, and we'll say switch port let's see here, switch port trunk native VLAN 55, and we're going to have to make sure that that actually took effect. So we'll say Control C, we'll do a show run, and we'll see here that yes, we've set the trunk native port to 55 where it's supposed to be, switch port mode trunk, right? And I'm not seeing the allowed VLANs here. So but maybe if you did 1 through switch port trunk allowed 1 through 1005, maybe it doesn't show. And then port 2 is VLAN 10, and let's see here. Port 5 is 77, that's good. Port 4 is 30. Port 3 is VLAN 20. All right, that's good. Let's see if we can get those allowed VLANs to show up on the trunk port. So what we'll do is we'll say conf t interface FA0/1 again, which is the first port where our trunk is, and we'll say, of course, it's switch port mode trunk, right, which we already put in, and then switch port trunk allowed. Let's just say VLANs 1 through, or you could say possibly 1, and then can you do comma? 1, 10, 20, 30, 55, 77. Can you do that? So there we go. Switch port trunk allowed VLAN 1, 10, 20, 30, 55, and 77. All right. And then, of course, the last command was, and we'll just put it in one more time just so you can see it, switch port trunk native VLAN 55. Control C, show run, and you can see there's the VLANs that are allowed, and it looks pretty good. Okay, so if we go back to our list, we have all of these things finished now. We set up our VLANs, IP address on interface VLAN 77, our default gateway. We configured the trunk, the native VLAN on the trunk, which is 55. We configured the switch ports to be access ports, and we put the switch ports on the separate VLANs. Now we don't have to have a port on native VLAN right now, so that's just, this is for backwards compatibility. So now it's time to configure the router, right? So for the router, we'll go into the router, and you can see there's no passwords on these routers or the switches. Just we're going right into global config mode, and we're going to configure interface FA0/0. So interface FA0/0, and we're going to right away we'll say no shutdown, and to turn on the interface. Now you can see it's got a green light. Now we need to set up these sub interfaces, right? So sub interface 10, 20, 30, 55, and 77, and then he's going to be host 1 on all of these networks. So he's 10.1, 20.1, 30.1, 55.1, and 77.1. So that should be pretty easy. So to do this, we now need to go into sub interface mode, and to do that we'll say interface FA0/0.10 to signify sub interface 10, right? And now we are in sub interface mode. Notice this. Okay, so I'll hit enter again so you can see it. Enter, enter. All right. Config sub interface. So now the first thing we need to do is set up encap, turn on the 802.1q protocol. So we'll say tab encapsulation dot tab dot 1q, right? Then we'll put a question mark, and now we need the VLAN ID. So we'll say VLAN 10. All right, so that's for encapsulation.q. We're going to tag it with VLAN 10, and now we need the IP address. IP address 192.168.10.1 space 255.255.255.0. Spread this out a little bit, hit enter, and that's done. So now we'll just do up arrow till we get to interface FA00.10. We'll change it to .20, enter, and then we'll go up to encapsulation.1q 20, and then change the IP address to 20.1. Up arrow to get to interface FA0/0.30. Okay, hit enter again. Up arrow encapsulation.1q VLAN 30, right? Because we're on sub interface 30. And then up arrow IP address 30.1. Okay, and then now we'll go straight to, now we have to do the native VLAN. So the native VLAN is going to be a little bit different. So what we'll do is we'll say interface FA0/0.55, and we're going to say encapsulation question mark, okay, dot tab dot 1q, put a question mark here, and then we'll say 55 space question mark. And notice if I put the 55 in and then I put a space and a question mark, we can put native at the end to make it the native VLAN. So we can specially configure the sub interface, the encapsulation.1q55, specially configure it for being native. All right, there it is. And now the IP address 55.1. All right, now last one, interface sub interface 77, encapsulation 77, and then the IP address 77.1. All right, Control C, enter, show run, and you can see all of the sub interfaces, right? And they're all active. And so now we should be able to communicate across the router. Let's do quickly a show IP route to look at the routing table. And it's always good to look at the routing table for sure. And you can see that the router sees the 10 network, the 20 network, the 30 network, the 55 network, and the 77 network, all as connected networks. and you can see the sub interfaces right here. And so now it's going to be able to route between all these networks. So now we could, if we wanted to, we could say, I'm going to take this management and let's see if we can ping 10.100. So we open up our laptop here, command prompt. First, let's see if we can ping the gateway, 192.168.77.1. We can ping our router. That's good. Good sign there. And let's see if we can ping 10.100. And of course, we're going to need to have ARP cache resolve the IP address to a MAC address. It takes some time, and there it is. All right. Let's see if we can do 20.100. All right, there's 20.100 and 30.100. Okay, so that's it. For the router, all we had to do was configure sub interfaces, encapsulation .1q, and special for the native VLAN, right? So basically all we did for the router was configure our sub interfaces. All of these networks are connected, and now our trunk is active, and we can communicate between all of these, or route packets between all of these separate networks across this trunk to the router. And this is a router on a stick because there's only one port or one line coming off of the router to hit the switch. So all of these networks are going across just one link, right? So that's the router and the stick idea. And if, as opposed to if you had something like this, where you had VLAN 10 and you had one link just for the 10 VLAN and another link just for the 20 VLAN and then another link just for the 30 VLAN, and then you'd have the 3 IP addresses on the 3 Ethernet interfaces. Instead of that, we do the router on the stick, we take advantage of the trunk, and we trunk from the switch to the router.